Hi there, and welcome on the journey to transform culture. I'm Steve, and I'll be your guide. Well, folks, I hope you're having a fantastic day and an even better week. In this video, folks, we're going to talk a little bit about changing the terms of our own thinking. I know you might be thinking, what? Changing the terms of our own thinking? What are you talking about? Well, if you think about it, as we have gone through life, it doesn't really matter where you are. It doesn't matter. And let me preface this also. We jump in talking about organizational culture because that's typically where we come together as teams, but that isn't it, right? There's plenty of other groups we're involved with, or churches, local community, all the things, right? But everything, as we know, is connected, whether it be professionally or personally. So take what you will, apply it well, and make your life a little more thriving where it applies. All right, changing the terms of your own thinking or of our own thinking, right? I can speak for myself. Again, as we've lived through life, situations occur to us, right? Situations, I won't say happen to us, but uh, we happen to situations, right? It could be a scenario. I'll give you a scenario. I was driving with my family. It was during the kids' spring break, and we were traveling south through Oregon. In Mount Hood, Oregon, I think it's Highway 26, if I'm not mistaken, crosses over the shoulder uh, of Mount Hood, but it's also snowy. Even during spring break time frame back, this is going back a couple decades plus, maybe three, and or at least two and a half. And anyway, I was driving. I had a GMC GME. It was loaded to the gills. Um, Fortunately, I was in four-wheel drive, but it was a clear day, and everybody was sleeping. I believe everybody was sleeping, and uh, and I was listening to some at the time XM radio, right? So I'm listening to some XM radio, and I don't know if it was a comedian or some talk show, whatever. And I'm just hauling, and I'm blasting up this hill, right? Blasting up the side of this volcano, right? And I'm hauling. But there comes a moment, and it was early in the morning too. There wasn't any traffic on the road. But as I just short of hitting the crest of the hill, it dawned on me, and I remembered that the little turnoff to get onto the other road that we were supposed to get onto did like a full 180, 360, almost 360. Something like that. Oh, yeah. So yeah. So it did this big sweep around, big loop. Or I would say it's a big loop, but a loop. But anyway, we had all this momentum, and I realized, oh my gosh, I'm going too fast. Well, uh, lightly snowy, packed ice around the edges kind of road, right? And it wasn't like clean, dry blacktop. Let's put it that way. But I was in four-wheel drive, and I realized I was going too fast, and I made the decision to go ahead and try to make the turn. And I'm going to tell you what, on either side, or at least on the back side of us, was a drop off. There were tree tops that was showing through snow that had been falling all winter long, right? Had we rolled off, nobody would have found us for hours. Who knows if they would have found us at all, right? And we were so packed in our vehicle with luggage and all the things, right? That, and there was 5 of us in there. Anyway, so as I come around, I was thinking, oh my gosh, we're going to go over the edge. All I could remember, it was like four-wheel drive, and I goosed it. And I used to play Halo, if anybody's familiar with that game, with my son and his buddies and my friend. And they're the Warthog Jeeps. Well, I was a great Warthog Jeep driver. I used my Warthog skills, and I just put the hammer down, and I rode that thing all the way around as if I'd been training for it my entire life. But that was probably, if I did that 999,000 and change more times, I bet you I couldn't have pulled it off as well as I did to keep us from going over the edge, it was the perfect scenario. But afterward, like about 30 seconds, 40 seconds, maybe not even that long, what felt like 30 or 40 seconds was probably like 10 seconds, I don't know. Then it hit me. I was like, oh my gosh, that was almost an ending scenario, right? But this is why we have to change the terms of our own thinking, right? There are times where we come to those forks in the road, and we're asked of ourselves, right? Do I make the turn, or do I continue, or do I diverge to the, do I move to the right, or do I take the left, or do I go straight? We have a choice to make, right? And so much of what happens in our life is about choices. But changing the terms of our own thinking is to understand this before we get to those points, right? We can go through these experiences in life, and there are so many experiences we've all had where things have made us go, oh my gosh, to where you're not going quite as quickly toward an oncoming exit, for example, and all of the things, right? But that make us think twice, right? Or should make us think twice. We pulled it off, but we wouldn't do that. We wouldn't repeat that behavior, right? There's a building of our lessons. There's a building of our knowledge and our wisdom. It isn't just to say, well, I'm wise about this because I experienced one thing, right? No, it's a succession of things. But it's different, right, for us, because we are engaged in different things. There might be somebody who's a plumber, somebody who's a roofer. If I have a leaky roof, I don't call the plumber. If my pipes are leaking or broken, I don't call a roofer, right? There are some folks who are geared more to handle certain issues than others, right? So there is a specialization, right? Those folks that encountered a lot of different things in their particular arena, their particular field. Just the same, our teams are made up of people who have encountered a lot of different things. But one of the difficulties for leadership teams and support staff and so forth is to understand, because they're quite often, not always, it's not always the case, but quite often, where they may be skilled in business matters, are not very skilled with hands-on matters, right? They're not very adept with that. So there is a level of deferring to the experts, right? And you have experts all around you in everything you do. Ultimately, leaders in site level and more have to make a decision, right? It could be supervisors, could be department leaders, could be division level, could be CEOs. It doesn't matter, whatever level. But you have to make a decision, and the decision is that you have to start to have to challenge the terms of your own thinking. Your thinking may have been reflexive to strictly certain monetary levers, right? Hey, when we do this and this and this happens, then, we tend to do well, right? Or we tend to do better, When we're consistent or inconsistent, right? Then so you may say, well, we need to work on our consistency in this particular area. And that may be true. But what is also simultaneously true is that there is a whole field of expertise underneath your own purview that you haven't, and when I say exploited, I'm saying you haven't vetted, right, thoughtfully and deeply enough to be able to understand what you can then, where opportunities to grow can come from, right? So you have to, this is why I have to say, challenge the terms of your own thinking. And this happens also, you could say intuitively, some may say spiritually, philosophically. Imagine if there's an angel on your shoulder whispering in your ear, do this thing. This is the right thing to do. But then you don't. Okay. Maybe it's a high integrity, high values thing, but then you don't, right? Because you're not because you're comfortable with the lever that you've always pulled or pushed, depending, right? The buttons that you've already pushed and pulled, and you know what those things do. Those things you can control, right? You may be a whiz at going out there and jumping into politics and changing the rules of the game, but you haven't really figured out a way to make the players better by doing that, right? And this is part of the challenge that we have, and we have to challenge, the terms of our own thinking and understand that we are very linear in our approach when we don't sometimes listen to that inner voice or that angel on your shoulder, whatever the case may be, right? Because oftentimes this is a clue, right? These winds will get your attention. What do you do with that? Do you take that and do you then turn that into something useful for yourself and for your team? The other element of this is kind of a servant leadership aspect. Are you then applying this toward your team? Because remember, folks, you could think of the human body, for example, as an example of a machine or an organization, right? So the people in your organization are the heart, right? Now, this isn't to say that you don't have heart, just like it isn't to say that if I was to say, well, you're the brains, you have brains, but you're not, figuratively, right? Not literally. From an organizational perspective, it may be the case. It may be the case that that you don't have all the information, right? Your team doesn't have all the information. Why? They're the heart. They're making that the blood that is the productivity and progress and quality come to life, right? They're animating your organization. Your team animates your organization. You simply provide the proper prior planning, hopefully, right? And this is another reason why we have to challenge, right, the terms of our own thinking. Because if we start to believe that as leaders, if we start to believe that we're the heart and the blood and the soul animating factor in the organization, then that means that you're disregarding the truth of the matter. You're disregarding the reality of the situation. And we don't want to separate and become disaligned, unaligned, whatever, from the rest of our team because of our thinking, right? Sometimes to challenge the terms of our own thinking is to make us and force us back into to have a bit of humility. If we don't have some humility and we believe that we are all of it, right, then problems occur. Quality, productivity suffer, right? You're not providing for your team. You're not providing attention. You're not pushing and pulling on the correct levers, right? You're avoiding some levers because you think you have it all figured out, and you don't. Now, conversely, right, if you're a broader member of the team, similarly, right, you're animating the organization by your activities and decisions that you make as well, right? But you don't always understand the ramifications, right, and the accumulations of, and I'm not saying no one does, right? I'm saying that we can often miss this. This is why I'm saying we have to challenge the terms of our own thinking, because if we allow our thinking to make us believe as broader team members that we understand that, well, this much scrap is okay, or this much delay is fine, or this is this and this is it, we aren't seeing it from we're not seeing the bigger picture. We're not seeing it, say, from the 20 or 30,000 foot level, much less the 40,000 foot level, right? We're seeing it from the 0 to 500 foot level. And you can see a lot at that level, but you're not seeing what the accumulative effects are when you don't take care of your team, even at that level, right? You aren't seeing necessarily cumulative effects and impacts on the customer or on the organization. The organization could be going down a journey on a path to a journey of shutting down, and you would never know it because you're seeing it from 500 feet down. Now, it's incumbent upon your leaders to keep you informed on how you're doing, and this is the reason why we're having this conversation, is we can't all see everything. We have to rely upon one another, and we have to challenge the terms of our own thinking in this regard, right? And we have to be able to listen to it, not only our intuition, but that angel on our shoulder, right? And say, okay, what am I missing here? And then listen for that response, right? Listen for that, that bell to ring and go, oh, you know what? We should really go down and investigate this because something tells me, right? Sometimes a hunch or an intuition can open up a door to help you solve problems that you didn't even realize that you had. Come across many scenarios where helping teams, because they didn't or weren't empowered to challenge the notion that they could create a more improved or better process, right? A better value stream, a more effective value stream, right? They were forced to deal with the arduous nature of a very poorly constructed value stream, and they weren't. The organizational culture suffered. Why? A simple lever was to empower your team. It wasn't you have to solve everything for others, or that the team has to solve their individual problems. Sure, there's levels of that we do. Of course, we do our best where we find opportunity to do so, hopefully. But that sometimes a very important key is to empower your team. Sometimes an important key for the broader team is to ask leaders questions to what? Provide you the visual landscape of what's going on. Now, I definitely think that leaders shouldn't have to be asked, okay? Shouldn't have to be asked. However, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't ask, okay? Right? You should ask. If something is unclear, you ask, right? You wouldn't do that if you were providing a product or a service and you're doing the work to deliver that, right? If you were uncertain, you would what? Hopefully you would ask. More folks hopefully would ask than they wouldn't ask, right? But it's those who don't ask that end up making the quality mistakes. Those who don't ask who end up, say, creating waste or running into productivity issues, or not keeping up with the mechanical responsibilities, and so on and so forth. And the myriad of potentiality for all the types of work out there is, I won't say endless, but very vast, right? So I couldn't give you an example for every scenario. But I will say, generally speaking, challenging the terms of our own thinking is so important, because we could run an organization right into the ground if we forget, who the heart of the organization is, right? If you forget about your team, organization, into the ground. If you forget about the customer, right? Naturally, that's a no-brainer. You forget about taking care of your team, but also taking care of what? The body, the organizational, we'll say the infrastructure, right? The physical infrastructure, which would be relegated to our health, right? If fitness means I need to stretch and do calisthenics and do, and walk and stay in shape and all the things, right? Take care of myself, get the right nutrients and balance and rest and all the things, right? These are things that we obviously need to do for us as humans in this human body, right? No different in your organization, right? So if you're trashing one part of your organization and it's just a mess and everybody has to walk around things, it's literally like clogging your arteries, right? You're clogging the arteries when you're not keeping everything, if things aren't well kept in an organized way. We don't organize to be fastidious. We organize so things move in a more predictable manner, right? It allows things to happen in a predictable way. This is how we can promise the customers that we will get them X by Y time frame, right? So hopefully these things are ringing true. This is fairly straightforward. The difficulty is if our teams and our leaders aren't empowered to think then they can't stop themselves from making that turn that's going to send them over the edge, right? Right? I give you the example about turning, on the snowy road. You have to challenge the terms of your own thinking, okay? And some of that means that we have to listen to our teammates. We have to listen to our leaders. Our leaders have to listen to the broader team. And if we're getting the sense that we're going down the wrong road, then we need to have the courage, right, to draw a line and say, nope, that's dangerous. We're not going down that road. We're going this way, and here's why, and it makes sense, right? Because why? The head isn't always going to know, what's best for the heart of the team. Okay, it just isn't. Your head is going to be thinking about thoughts and where am I going and what's going on. It's so much external, right? A lot of the time, you're going to be looking outward more. And so, what is that? What do we do as human beings? We're supposed to slow down and look in, right? Go in to heal, to improve, to maintain our health, to maintain balance, to get all the things, right? No different in our organizations, no different in culture. We have to be courageous enough to challenge the terms of our own thinking. It could be old paradigms that you have never questioned. If you're unable and you're not enabling your teams to question old paradigms, that is a slippery slope right over the edge. Questioning old paradigms is paramount, absolutely paramount. Now, this goes beyond organizations. This is local communities, culture, the broader culture. Our voices to be heard, to challenge paradigms makes us better, right? If you say, Steve, why this? And I can't answer why that, then that's where I have a problem, right? Now I have to figure out, maybe I don't have the answer to that. Maybe I need to learn and figure that out, right? Not, well, just do as I say, not as I, do as I say, not as I do, right? The old saying that parents used to use on their kids back when the world was arcane, whatever. But challenging the terms of our own thinking, so important, folks. And I just can't stress enough. Put on the brakes, take a look around, read the room, read the environment, read the situation, and make cogent, clear, and sober decisions. Because, when I turned on that road, I had my family in the vehicle. The decisions we make are affecting more than just ourselves. They're affecting everyone around us. So keep that in mind. Every decision you make affects way more than just yourself. All right, folks, hope you're having a fantastic day. Remember to hit that good green domino 3 to 5 times a day or more to uplift, motivate, inspire, and just encourage one another. When you do this, not only are you helping to transform culture, but you're transforming your own life. But remember, we can't transform anything on the outside if we're not willing to first transform on the inside. That's so important. All right, folks, have a fantastic day. Hit like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, we'll talk to you later.